You think money protects people from psychological damage. You're wrong about what money actually does. Here's the first question. If wealth eliminates suffering, why do the people closest to the most extreme wealth show some of the highest rates of anxiety, identity collapse, and chronic emptiness on the planet? Not the billionaire, the people around him, the wife, the sibling, the child, the friend who's known him since before the money existed. Why them? Most people assume the answer is obvious. They're spoiled, they didn't earn it. They feel guilty about privilege they didn't work for. That's the comfortable explanation. It lets everyone else feel better about not having what they have. But that explanation is wrong. And understanding why it's wrong changes everything you think you know about what wealth actually does to the people inside it. Let's start with a question nobody asks. What happens to your identity when your entire existence is defined by proximity to someone else's achievement? Not your achievement. Theirs. You didn't build the company. You didn't take the risk. You didn't sacrifice the relationships and the sleep and the years that the billionaire sacrificed to get there. You just happen to be born into the same family or marry into it or be standing nearby when the explosion happened. Now your last name is a brand. Your face is associated with a fortune you had no hand in creating. Every room you walk into, people are calculating your net worth before you finish your first sentence. Who are you, exactly? This is the question billionaire family members cannot answer. Not because they're incapable of self-reflection, because the environment around them actively prevents the answer from forming. Identity requires friction. It requires failure, recovery, and the slow accumulation of self-knowledge that only comes from testing yourself against the world. Billionaire family members are insulated from that friction from birth. The world bends around them. Problems get solved before they fully materialize. Consequences get softened by money before they can teach anything, so the self never fully forms. And an unformed self, dressed in luxury and surrounded by deference, is one of the most destabilizing psychological conditions a human being can experience. You cannot build a stable inner life on a foundation the world keeps rearranging to suit you, but you still don't know why proximity specifically damages people more than wealth itself. Here's the next question. Why is the sibling of a billionaire often more psychologically fractured than the billionaire? Think about that carefully. The billionaire built something. He has a narrative, a reason for existing that the world validates constantly. His identity is fused with the company, the mission, the empire. It's not healthy, but it's coherent. The sibling has none of that coherence. He went to the same schools, grew up in the same house, ate at the same table, but he didn't build the thing. So now he exists in permanent comparative shadow, measuring every achievement against a standard that was never meant to be a competition, but became one the moment the first Forbes article was published. His successful company, which employs hundreds of people and turns a genuine profit, gets described in every article as something the brother of a billionaire built. The achievement is real. The recognition is permanently contaminated. This is a specific kind of psychological damage that has no name because it only exists at this level of wealth. It's not jealousy. It's not resentment. It's the slow erosion of being unable to own your own story. Every win gets attributed to the name. Every loss gets blamed on the name. Your actual self, the choices you made, the work you put in across a decade, disappears inside the narrative that the money created around your family. The billionaire gets asked about his vision. The sibling gets asked about his brother. And over years, that distinction carves something out of a person that no amount of success can fully restore. So what about the ones who didn't grow up in it? The ones who married in? Different question now. What happens when you enter a system mid-story after all the rules have already been written? The spouse arrives with her own identity, her own career, her own sense of who she is. A successful attorney, a person who believed she understood what wealth looked like. She was wrong. Because there is a difference between rich and billionaire rich that cannot be explained, only experienced. The floral arrangements at her wedding cost more than most people's entire weddings. She honeymooned on an island her husband bought for the occasion and then donated to conservation because keeping it seemed excessive. Now she manages a foundation that distributes more money annually than most governments allocate to public health. Her calendar is run by someone with an MBA who earns more than a federal judge. Every public appearance gets analyzed. Every outfit becomes a statement about wealth inequality. Every charity she supports gets scrutinized for political implications. And yet she is still one step removed from every decision that actually matters. Family meetings pause when she walks in. Business discussions shift into safer territory in her presence. Her husband's siblings have a group chat she's not in. She is simultaneously inside the most powerful family structure on Earth and permanently adjacent to its core. The question this creates is unanswerable and relentless. Am I here because of who I am or because of who I married? That question, repeated across years, across events, across dinners with people who knew him before she existed in his life, hollows something out, not quickly, gradually, the way water shapes stone. And the more refined the life around her becomes, the quieter and more invisible that erosion gets. Now here's the question that reframes everything you've just accepted. You've been thinking about this as a problem of identity, but what if identity is only half of it? What if the deeper damage is relational? What does it do to a human being when every relationship in their life is structurally asymmetrical? The billionaire's oldest friend, the one who was his roommate at university, the one who told him the startup was too risky and got a conference room named after him as a long-running joke, has known him for 40 years. They spend New Year's Eve together every year. Their kids are friends, their wives coordinate, the friendship is real. And yet when this man suggested his friend invest in a business idea, the response was a formal pitch meeting scheduled through an assistant, like a stranger cold calling the office. He pays for dinner every single time they go out because the amounts are meaningless to him, which means his oldest friend can never reciprocate, can never pick up the check, can never hold that small moment of equality that every genuine friendship quietly requires to stay alive. 40 years of genuine friendship, and gratitude and resentment have become the same feeling. This is the relational damage of proximity to extreme wealth. It doesn't destroy relationships, it slowly removes the symmetry from them. And relationships without symmetry are not really relationships. They're something else, something that looks like connection from the outside but functions like performance from the inside. You learn to inhabit the shape of closeness without ever quite reaching it, and you learn to call that normal, because in this world it is. But the deepest damage isn't in the spouse, the sibling, or the friend. The deepest damage is in the children. Here's the question that will sit with you after this ends. What does it do to a developing human being to grow up in an environment where consequences have been permanently removed? The 17-year-old whose birthday party generated thousands of comments from strangers calling her spoiled and out of touch, who sees a therapist who specializes in high-net-worth family dynamics, whose college application was managed by consultants who navigate admissions specifically for ultra-wealthy families, whose extracurriculars include founding a nonprofit backed by the family foundation and interning at companies that are portfolio investments. She cannot date normally. Every relationship gets analyzed by security teams, then publicists, then eventually the media. Her last relationship ended when the person she trusted sold photos of the family's vacation house to a tabloid. Think carefully about what that teaches a young person about intimacy, about the fundamental human experience of allowing someone to know you, of choosing to be vulnerable and discovering it was safe. She is learning, at 17, that closeness is a liability. That openness is a calculated risk, that the people who seem most interested in knowing her are often running a calculation she cannot see and was never invited to understand. This is not a personality flaw. This is a rational adaptation to an irrational environment, and rational adaptations that form during adolescence don't dissolve when the environment changes. They become the architecture of how a person moves through the world for the rest of their life. She will carry this into every relationship she ever tries to build, the inherited suspicion, the learned distance, the reflexive calculation running beneath every moment of apparent warmth. This is how generational psychological damage works inside billionaire families. The founder sacrificed relationships for the empire. The children of the founder grow up inside the empire but are never fully inside it. And their children grow up learning that the world is a transaction, that trust is dangerous, and that their value as human beings is inseparable from the name they were born with. You cannot buy your way out of that inheritance. It compounds across generations the same way the money does. So here is the root question beneath all of it. Why do we assume that the problem of being human can be solved by the removal of material constraints? Every level of proximity to extreme wealth creates a different version of the same wound. The lack of a self you built, the inability to own your own story, the asymmetry that hollows out every relationship, the removal of consequence that prevents genuine development. The learned suspicion that makes real intimacy feel like a threat. The billionaire built something. He has a coherent identity even if it consumed everything else in the process. The people around him have neither the achievement nor the freedom from it. They live inside someone else's story, permanently. And living inside someone else's story, no matter how extraordinary that story is, no matter how many bedrooms the house has or how much appears in your bank account every December, is one of the oldest and quietest forms of suffering that human beings are capable of experiencing. The money doesn't cause the damage, the proximity does, because proximity without authorship is just a very expensive form of disappearing.